The lamp wick was halfway into Silas Hart's basket before he noticed Laura's hand there. He looked down at the three things he had chosen: coffee, beans, and oats, then at the narrow coil of cotton beside them. "I didn't ask for that." "No," Laura Finch said, reaching for 2 onions. "You also didn't ask for soap last Sunday." Around them, the Red Mesa market had begun its autumn stir. Wagon wheels groaned over packed dirt. A butcher lifted his shutters. Somewhere beyond the produce rows, a mule protested the cold. Laura kept her eyes on the basket. Silas removed the onions and set them back on her table. "I have onions?" They were soft 2 weeks ago. His hand stopped. Laura remembered almost anything connected to trade: who bought flour before payday, whose children disliked turnips, which ranch hands needed salt before a drive. Silas's needs had simply become easier to remember than most. He wore the same dust-dark coat each Sunday. At 58, he moved like a man who made every step count. His wife had been dead 6 years, and his purchases had narrowed with each one. Coffee, beans, oats, enough to keep a man and his horse moving. Nothing that suggested comfort. Laura returned the onions to his basket. "Your total is 82 cents. Silas looked from the soap to the wick. "That's not the total. It is this morning." "Laura." A customer approached with a sack over one arm, and Laura turned away before Silas could make her explain. She weighed potatoes, exchanged a cracked apple for a sound one, and warned the woman that frost was expected above the North Ridge. When Laura looked back, Silas had paid and taken the basket. But the price slip was gone from the counter. That mattered. Silas usually left every scrap of paper behind. Laura watched him disappear between 2 wagons. One reed along the basket's rim had begun to work loose. She had noticed it the week before and nearly tied it down with twine. But there were limits, even she understood, or tried to. The market filled quickly. A gust came down from the mesa, sharp enough to lift her awning. Laura pressed a crate against one post and called to Mateo Ruiz at the next stall. "Move your tomatoes under canvas. The temperature's falling." Mateo glanced at the clear sky. No clouds. "Feel the wind." He did, then began shifting crates. Laura warned the herb seller to cover her basil and told the egg woman to move closer to the bakery wall. She rearranged her own produce by what could bear cold. Pumpkins stayed outside. Tender greens went beneath burlap. Apples were stacked low where the wind could not roll them. Before noon, the mountain air turned thin and biting. Customers came back for onions, potatoes, and lamp oil. Mateo sold every tomato he had protected. "You saved me half a week's earnings," he told Laura. She smiled and wrote the sale in her brown tally book. A dark ring from her coffee cup spread across the lower corner. Near the edge of the market, Silas stood beside the hitching rail. He had not left. The basket hung from his hand. Coffee, beans, and oats sat at the bottom. The onions were still there. So were the soap and lamp wick. Then he started toward her. Laura closed the tally book and rested both hands on it. Silas stopped at her stall. In one hand he held the basket, in the other, her price slip, folded once down the middle. "You left out 23 cents, he said. Laura met his eyes. "Did I? You don't make mistakes with numbers." "No." His gaze lowered to the lamp wick, then returned to her face. The wind rattled the awning above them. "How did you know," Silas asked quietly, "that my lamp had gone dark?" Silas held the folded slip between 2 fingers, as though it might prove more than either of them intended. Laura looked past him toward the market lane. "You bought oil 3 Sundays ago and no wick. Either you had one hidden somewhere, or your lamp was dark." "It was dark." "And your roof?" His expression changed. Laura opened the tally book again, though she did not need it. "You bought a bucket, nails, and tar in August?" "No canvas. The north wind came hard last week. I guess the patch had lifted." Silas looked into the basket. Beneath the onions and soap lay a narrow roll of roofing cloth Laura had tucked under the oats. "You put this into. You needed it." "That isn't an answer." "It is the only one I have." He placed 23 cents on the counter. Laura pushed the coins back. Silas pushed them toward her again. Neither moved for a moment. Then Laura took the money, because refusing it would turn care into charity, and she knew his pride well enough not to do that in front of half the town. Silas left without another word. That night, the wind struck his cabin hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. Rain followed after dark, thin at first, then driven sideways against the north wall. Water found the lifted edge above the kitchen window and began dropping onto the floor. Silas set a pan beneath it. The old lamp beside the stove gave one weak flare and went black. He stood in the silence until his hand found Laura's wick. Within minutes, warm light filled the room. He climbed to the loft with the roofing cloth and fixed the leaking seam from inside, fastening it beneath the loose boards until the dripping stopped. By morning, the cabin smelled of wet pine, coffee, and the soap he had claimed not to need. When the next Sunday's church bell carried across Red Mesa, Silas arrived before Laura finished stacking her apples. He placed a small cloth packet on her counter. "What is this?" she asked. "Payment for the roofing cloth. You paid last week." "No, I paid for the wick and onions." Laura opened the packet. Inside were 2 silver pieces, more than the cloth had cost. She counted out the difference and returned it. Silas watched her fingers. "You always know the exact amount." "That is my work." "No," he said. "Your work is selling produce." Before Laura could answer, 3 customers arrived at once. A cold spell had driven families toward the market, and the demand for onions, potatoes, dried herbs, and lamp supplies rose faster than the stalls could manage. Laura moved between tables, trading Mateo 6 crates of potatoes for his remaining tomatoes, sending a boy to the dry goods wagon for lamp oil, and dividing the last sack of onions among 4 households instead of allowing one ranch cook to buy them all. When the herb seller ran short of sage, Laura opened her reserve box. "You saved some?" the woman asked. "I knew the cold would bring coughs." By midday, every vendor around her had sold steadily without turning customers away. Silas stayed near the stall, lifting crates and carrying sacks when Laura pointed. He never asked what needed doing. He watched, learned, and moved. When the rush eased, Laura handed him coffee in a tin cup. "You were useful." "So were you." She smiled faintly. "That sounds almost like praise." "It is." A shadow crossed the counter. Evan Cole stood there in a clean brown coat, a small bunch of late yellow flowers in one hand. At 29, he carried himself with the easy certainty of a man whose future had never frightened him. He set the flowers beside Laura's scale. "The railroad office closes early next Sunday," he said. "Would you take supper with me after market?" The nearest vendors went quiet without pretending not to listen. Laura looked at the flowers, then at Evan. Behind him, Silas still held the tin cup. Evan waited, and Silas stood close enough to hear her answer. Laura did not answer Evan at once. She moved the yellow flowers away from the damp edge of the counter. "I will think about supper," she said. It was not acceptance. It was not refusal either. Evan smiled. "That is fair." Silas set down his tin cup. By the time Laura turned toward him, he was carrying an empty crate toward Mateo's wagon. 7 mornings later, frost silvered the market roofs as a freight team reached Red Mesa 2 hours late, with mud dried to the horses' flanks and one sideboard cracked. The driver climbed down holding a creased shipping sheet. 2 crates lost at the crossing. He called, "I have what survived." Vendors crowded the wagon. The bakery's dried fruit was missing. Mateo had received half his ordered onions. 3 labeled boxes belonged to a town 40 miles south. Voices rose as everyone claimed what they had paid for. Laura took the sheet, set the crates in one row, labels facing out. A storekeeper objected. "We need the invoice first." "The invoice tells us what left Albuquerque. The wagon tells us what arrived." She walked the line once. 6 sacks of potatoes, 4 onion crates, 2 boxes of dried apples, lamp oil, salt, coffee, a case of medicines, no flour, no raisins. 1 crate marked for San Pilar that contained Red Mesa soap. Laura handed the paper back. Mateo ordered 6 onion crates and received 4. Mrs. Vale ordered both apple boxes. The bakery's raisins never arrived. The soap belongs at the dry goods counter, whatever the lid says. She directed the unloading before anyone could argue. The general store received salt but surrendered half its lamp oil to waiting families. Mateo kept 3 onion crates and traded the 4th to Laura for potatoes. The bakery took dried apples at the raisin price, with the difference marked against its next shipment. Silas arrived while Laura was dividing the medicine case. He watched her settle 5 disputes without raising her voice. When one ranch cook demanded all 6 potato sacks, Laura placed her hand on the nearest one. You may have 2 today. 4 households ordered before you. I have 15 men to feed, and they will eat, so will everyone else. The cook took 2. A gust sent the freight sheet under the wagon. Silas retrieved it, then began lifting crates wherever Laura pointed. Mud darkened his cuffs. The loose reed on his basket snagged against a nail, but he pulled it free and kept working. By noon, the wagon stood empty and every item had been assigned. Mateo wiped his forehead. Without that little brown book, we would still be fighting. Laura held up the tally book. Its coffee-stained corner had softened and curled. I barely opened it. Silas looked from the book to the orderly stalls. You remembered all of it. Enough. He carried the final apple box beneath her awning. That is more than enough. This time, he did not look away after speaking. Laura handed him a cloth to clean his hands. Their fingers touched briefly. Silas stayed beside her while the market settled, repairing a torn produce sack and stacking empty crates without being asked. Evan arrived near midday with no flowers. He rolled up his sleeves and helped brace the freight wagon's cracked board. There was no rivalry in the work. Evan stood where everyone could see him. Silas helped as though usefulness granted him permission to remain, then stepped back whenever the task ended. Near closing, Laura prepared winter reserve bundles beneath her table. For the schoolteacher, dried apples and soap. For Mateo's mother, potatoes, sage, and lamp oil. For Silas, onions, 2 wicks, soap, cough herbs, and roofing cloth. She wrapped his bundle in brown paper and wrote his name across the top. Silas approached before she could put it away. His eyes rested on the bundle. Then 2 market women passed behind him. Mr. Cole will ask her properly before winter. One said, he would be a fine future for her. The other replied, a man willing to choose her, where folks can see. Silas did not touch the package bearing his name. Laura saw his hand close around the empty handle of his basket. A week of dry wind worked the loose brace beneath Laura's stall until it gave way before noon. One side of the counter dropped hard enough to send 3 apples rolling into the lane. Laura caught the scale before it tipped, but the basket of onions slid against her hip. Silas reached the stall before anyone else. Hold that corner. Laura planted both hands on the counter while he crouched in the dust. He removed the split brace, measured the gap with his thumb, and crossed to the wagon sheds for scrap pine. He returned with a saw, 2 nails, and a narrow board. He worked without speaking while Laura continued weighing produce above him. A customer asked whether the stall was safe. It will be, Laura said. From underneath came Silas's voice. It is now. He drove the final nail and tested the counter with his weight. It held. Laura set aside 2 apples before he could leave. You fixed more than you broke. I did not break it. You were near enough to be blamed. He almost smiled. The rush eased. Cold sunlight reached the edge of Laura's awning, and neither found an urgent reason to move. She poured coffee from the pot beneath the stall and handed him a tin cup. Silas stayed. They watched Mateo argue over the price of squash. A boy chased a paper wrapper between wagon wheels. Near the butcher's row, a fiddle played the same 6 notes until someone shouted for mercy. Laura leaned against the repaired counter. If you had more than beans every night, what would you eat? Silas looked into his coffee, whatever was there. That is not an answer. It has kept me alive. Alive is a low standard for supper. He lifted his eyes. Laura turned an apple in her hand. Roast chicken, small red onions, apples cooked with cinnamon, coffee strong enough to make sleep a choice, and candles. She glanced at him. For a proper table, he said, 2 candles. One always burns crooked. Silas laughed. It was quiet and rough from disuse, but it changed his whole face. Laura had heard him speak kindly and tease a horse. She had never heard him laugh without cutting the sound short, as if pleasure required apology. This time, he let it remain. You should do that more often, she said. Break stalls. Stay after fixing them. His hand closed around the cup. For one clean moment, the market stepped back from them. No one needed change. No wagon blocked the lane. No one asked Laura to remember what they had forgotten. Silas looked at the second cup hanging beneath the counter. You take supper alone. Most nights. He nodded once, filing away the fact. Laura waited. Evan Cole approached carrying Laura's shawl, which she had left at the railroad office after delivering produce. The yellow flowers from the previous Sunday stood in a jar beside the scale, their petals beginning to curl. "You will need this before sundown," Evan said. "The wind is turning." Laura accepted it. "Thank you." Evan noticed the repaired brace. "I came too late to help." Silas handled it. "Looks solid." There was no challenge in his tone. That made Silas's silence worse. "May I walk you home when the market closes?" Evan asked. Laura opened her mouth. Silas put down the tin cup. "I have fences to check." "You said the north pasture was done," Laura replied. His gaze flicked toward the flowers. Then he took his basket and left before she could tell him she had never accepted Evan's supper invitation. 7 days of wind stripped the cottonwoods nearly bare. Ice edged the market trough when Laura opened her tally book and found no reserve bundle beneath the counter. She had left Silas's shelf empty. He arrived after the church bell, carrying the basket by its loosened handle. No coffee sat inside it, no beans, no oats. Silas placed the completely empty basket on Laura's counter. "I paid what I owed," he said. "You do not need to set anything aside again." Laura stared at the bare woven bottom. Silas kept his voice careful. "I can manage without your help." Laura did not touch the basket. Around them, Red Mesa market kept moving. Coins struck counters. A wagon tongue creaked. Someone called for turnips at the far end of the lane. Yet the space between Laura and Silas held still. "You paid what you owed," she said. Silas nodded. "And now you have decided that settles it." "I decided you should not have to keep doing for me what I ought to do myself." Laura looked into the empty basket. The bottom carried a dark water stain from his leaking roof, and one reed along the rim had begun to curl outward. "Did I ever say it was a burden?" "No." "Did I ask you to repay every onion?" "No." "Then what are you paying for?" Silas glanced toward the neighboring stalls. Mateo had stopped arranging squash. The egg seller suddenly found great interest in a basket already in order. Silas lowered his voice. "Folks have begun talking. They have talked about me since I was old enough to stand behind this counter. They say Cole means to court you properly. That concerns Evan and me. It concerns me if people think I have kept you waiting while I took whatever you offered." Laura's hand tightened around the edge of the stall. There it was. Not cruelty. Something harder to answer because Silas believed it was honor. He placed a folded paper beside her scale. The figures were written carefully: 23 cents for the wick, 12 for the onions, 9 for soap, 30 for roofing cloth, and smaller amounts reaching back through months of Sundays. Laura read every line. "You counted all of it. As near as I could. You forgot the cough herbs in March." Silas's mouth tightened. "Add them. And the cedar shavings I put with your flour when moths got into the storehouse. Add those too. The apples after your horse threw you near Willow Bend." "I did not ask for apples." "No. You never ask for anything that might make a hard week easier." A customer approached, saw Laura's expression, and quietly moved to another stall. Silas pushed a small stack of coins across the counter. "I am not trying to insult you. You are trying to make 3 years disappear into a column of numbers. I am trying to release you from an obligation." Laura stared at him. "An obligation," she repeated. Silas heard the damage then. His shoulders shifted beneath his coat, but he did not take the word back. "The town sees Evan bring flowers," he said. "He can offer you a home near the railroad office, regular wages, a future that does not begin with repairing what another woman left behind." Laura closed the tally book. "My kindness was never an agreement to wait." "I know." "No. You know how to say thank you. You know how to leave coins behind. You know how to step away before anyone can ask what you want." Silas's gaze dropped to the basket. Laura lifted the brown paper reserve bundle from beneath the counter. She unwrapped it slowly. 2 lamp wicks, a bar of soap, 3 onions, a packet of cough herbs. She set each item back on its proper shelf. Then she drew a line through Silas Hart in her tally book. The softened corner caught beneath her thumb and tore half an inch. Silas watched the ink cross his name. "You will have what you asked for," she said. By late afternoon, the cold had driven the last customers home. Laura packed bruised apples into a crate and lowered the canvas over her stall. The flowers Evan had brought were dry at the edges. She removed them from the jar, but she could not yet make herself throw them away. There is a loneliness in being needed only so long as you ask for nothing in return. Many people will welcome a steady hand, a remembered comfort, or a light left burning. But when gratitude never becomes choice, How long should a giving heart remain at the door? Laura stood alone for a moment after the market emptied. Then she heard Silas behind her. He had not taken the basket. It remained on the counter, empty as the space he believed he was creating for her. Laura picked it up and crossed to him. She placed it against his chest until he had no choice but to grip the loosened handle. Silas looked down at it. Laura. She held his gaze. Then manage without me. 7 days later, clouds lowered over Red Mesa until the mesa rim disappeared behind gray rain. Laura fastened the stall canvas twice before opening. The wind worried every knot and drove grit beneath the awning. Vendors kept one eye on the sky while arranging their goods. Silas came through the market carrying the empty basket. He stopped across the lane, close enough to help if asked, and far enough to honor what Laura had said. She did not ask. The first hard gust struck near noon. Canvas snapped above the stalls. A stack of wooden trays toppled from Mateo's table, spilling tomatoes across the mud. Laura caught her scale with one hand and grabbed the awning rope with the other. Lower every canvas, she called. Move flour and salt against the bakery wall. Oil crates under the wagons. Rain arrived before anyone finished. It came sideways, cold enough to sting bare skin. Customers ran for the covered walk beside the dry goods store. Vendors dragged crates through water, already gathering between the wagon ruts. Laura tied down her awning, then crossed to help the egg seller lift 2 boxes. A knot tore loose behind her. The canvas cracked like a rifle shot and struck the corner of her stall. Her brown tally book slid from the counter. Silas lunged for it, but a sheet of rain carried it beneath a wagon. Laura dropped to one knee and pulled it free. Water ran from the pages. Ink bled along the edges, turning names and numbers into dark blue shadows. The reserve orders. Mateo said, "Can you still read them?" Laura opened the book once, saw the damage, and shut it. Mrs. Vale has 2 apple boxes and 5 pounds of potatoes. The bakery has sage, dried cherries, and 4 onions. Ortega's ranch takes 1 oil crate, salt, and the remaining oats. She pointed as she spoke. Move! Silas hauled the oil. Mateo found the apples. Laura stood in the rain, calling every order from memory while the market shifted around her. Nothing stayed dry. Nothing stayed where it belonged. Still, each crate reached the proper wagon. A gust tore the empty basket from the hook beside Silas. It rolled across the lane, struck a wagon wheel, and dropped into the gutter. The rim split where the loose reed had weakened it. Silas lifted it from the muddy water. Laura saw him holding the broken basket, but another rope snapped and pulled her away. They worked until the storm began moving east. Laura's hands had gone numb. Half her apples were bruised, and the tally book's pages had swollen against the binding. Silas set the basket beneath her stall. Mud stained the woven bottom. One side of the rim gaped open. I will repair it, he said. It is yours. No. He looked at her. It has been yours every Sunday I carried it. Laura began sorting the damaged produce. Silas did not leave. The wick kept my lamp burning, he said. The cloth kept rain off my floor. The herbs settled my cough. The soap, the onions, the apples, all those things made that cabin work after I stopped caring whether it felt like a home. Laura placed a split apple in the discard crate. I should have understood what you were giving me. You understand now. Yes, that does not change what you chose. The words landed without anger. Silas seemed to feel their full weight. Laura opened the tally book near the back. The page buckled beneath her fingers. Most of the ink had blurred, but the black line through his name remained visible. Silas Hart, crossed out. Across the lane, the butcher began packing unsold chickens in straw. The baker stacked his final loaves. Mateo covered the red onions, and the harness maker bundled narrow rawhide strips before the weather ruined them. The final market bell rang from the dry goods porch. Vendors began tying shut their wagons. The butcher lowered one shutter. The baker covered the last loaves. Silas looked from his ruined name to the closing stalls, then to the broken basket in his hands. Less than 1 hour remained before Laura left Red Mesa Market, and for the first time, he had to remember what she needed without her telling him. The final bell's echo had not faded when Silas set the broken basket on the harness maker's bench. Can you spare me rawhide? The old man looked at the split rim, then at Silas's face. For a repair. For something I should have fixed sooner. He cut two narrow strips and pushed them across the bench. Silas worked standing up. His fingers were stiff from rain, and the wet reeds resisted him. He drew the broken rim together, threaded rawhide through the weave, and pulled until the basket held its shape again. The repair was rough, but strong. Then he started through the closing market. At the butcher's stall, he bought a small roasting chicken. At Mateo's, he chose red onions, not the large yellow ones he bought when he remembered onions at all, and two firm apples from Laura's bruised stock, paying full price into the tin box beside her scale. The baker had one loaf left beneath a cloth. "The corner's hard," the baker warned. "It will soften beside a fire." Silas took it. From the dry goods wagon, he bought 2 candles, lamp oil, coffee, cinnamon, and soap. He added potatoes, salt, and dried sage. At every stall, he remembered what Laura had named and what she had never named because she was too accustomed to providing it herself. 2 portions, 2 cups worth of coffee beyond supper. Enough lamp oil that she would not have to walk home in darkness if the meal ran late. Evan Cole stepped from beneath the railroad office awning as Silas crossed the lane. Rain had darkened his coat at the shoulders. "You are buying supper," Evan said. "I am asking for it." Evan glanced at the chicken, candles, and 2 apples. "Then ask her. Do not make me the reason." Silas met his eyes. "Laura has not promised me anything." Evan continued. "She deserves a man who speaks to her, not around her." There was no insult in it, no contest either. Silas nodded. "You are right." "I know." Evan stepped aside. Laura was fastening canvas over her stall when Silas returned. Most of the market had emptied, but the remaining vendors slowed their work. Mateo stood with one foot on his wagon wheel. The butcher paused before lowering his second shutter. Silas walked through the center of the lane carrying the repaired basket with both hands. Laura saw the rawhide first, then the red onions, the apples, the chicken, the bread, 2 candles beside the coffee. Silas set the basket on her counter. The brace he had repaired the week before held beneath its weight. "I remembered the onions," he said. Laura said nothing. "And the apples with cinnamon, strong coffee, 2 candles. Though I cannot promise either will burn straight." A small breath moved through her, almost a laugh and not yet forgiveness. Silas removed his hat. "For years, I let you notice every small thing that kept me fed, dry, warm, and decent. I called it consideration because that word did not ask anything of me." Laura rested one hand on the rawhide-bound rim. "I thought stepping aside was honorable." He continued. "It was only another way to let you carry the cost." The market had gone quiet, but Silas did not look toward the witnesses. "I can manage alone. That was never the question." Laura raised her eyes. "The question is whether I want to keep arranging my life around being alone." He touched the basket handle, then let go, leaving the choice between them. "I do not." The words were plain and unrehearsed. "There is enough here for supper for 2, he said. "Enough coffee for morning. I would like you to come to my cabin and show me how badly I chose the apples." Laura laughed softly. Silas waited until the sound faded. "And after supper, I want to learn what you need before you have to hide it in somebody else's basket." Mateo resumed tying his wagon. The butcher closed his shutter without noise. Evan remained beneath the awning, leaving Laura an answer that belonged only to her. She lifted the basket. The mended handle settled into her palm. It was heavier than any Silas had carried from her stall, not because of the chicken or coffee, but because every item had been deliberately remembered. Laura looked toward the market road, then back at him. Silas had finally arrived with an offer instead of a debt. Now she had to decide whether he had arrived in time. Laura looked down at the basket once more. Then she stepped from behind the stall. "I will come for supper," she said, "but I am not coming to reward one good hour." Silas nodded. "I know. You do not know yet." "No," he said, "but I mean to learn." That was enough to begin with. They left Red Mesa Market beneath a sky still heavy with rain. Silas carried the basket as far as the road. Then Laura took one handle and made him take the other. At the cabin, the lamp burned steadily beside the stove. Laura noticed the patched roof first. The cloth she had tucked beneath his oats months earlier still held above the kitchen window. The room was clean but spare. One chair stood at the table. One cup waited beside the coffee pot. Silas brought another chair from the wall and set out a second cup. They worked without ceremony. Laura cleaned the chicken while Silas peeled potatoes and cut the red onions. He chose the wrong knife, cut the apples too thick, and used enough cinnamon for twice the pan. Laura corrected him only when necessary. When the chicken began to brown, Silas placed the two candles on the table. One stood straight, the other leaned in its holder. "I warned you," he said. Laura smiled. "A proper table needs one crooked candle." They ate while rain tapped against the repaired roof. Silas asked about her winter orders, the loose wheel on her handcart, and whether the room she rented above the mill stayed warm after midnight. Laura answered the first two questions easily. At the third, she set down her fork. "No," she said, "it does not." Silas waited. Laura looked toward the second cup, the second chair, and the basket beside the door. "I need a place where I am not welcomed only when I am useful," she said. "I need questions asked plainly. I need work shared before I'm tired enough to ask. And I will not spend another season guessing whether kindness means anything after the door closes." Silas listened without interrupting. Then he rose, took her damp shawl from the chair back, and hung it beside his coat on the peg by the stove. "I can begin with that," he said. He poured the remaining coffee into two covered tins instead of one. "One for tomorrow morning," he added. "One for the morning after. If you choose to be here." Laura touched the torn corner of her tally book where it lay drying near the stove. She opened to the page where his name had been crossed out. Below the black line, she wrote, "Roast chicken, red onions, apples, coffee, 2 candles, supper for 2. Silas looked over her shoulder but did not ask what the words meant. Some answers had to be lived longer than one evening. When the market awnings rose the next Sunday, Silas was already there repairing the loose wheel on Laura's handcart. She gave him no free onions. He paid the proper price, then stayed to stack crates. A week later, before sunrise reached the produce row, Laura found coffee waiting at her stall. By the first hard frost, a second cup had a permanent place beside Silas's stove, and Laura's shawl no longer looked borrowed on the peg. The rawhide mended basket hung beside the cabin door. Mud remained deep in its weave, and the cracked rim would never look new again. But its handle had been smoothed by 2 hands carrying the weight together. The basket still carried what they needed, but neither of them had to wonder anymore who had remembered.